So, Lone Rider here, and this is both a follow-up on my Hanway Practical Rapier and on my saber. And I just wanted to talk briefly about tipping your sword. If the tip on the end isn't sufficient to keep the sword from perhaps accidentally penetrating a target, like your sparring partner, sometimes you have to put a tip over the end. People use various things. These are just rubber tips that are easy to come by and whatnot. And it's just I don't like them. I think they're ugly. I think they ruin the aesthetic. But at least it meets sufficient resistance that it's not going to actually, it's going to flex before it stabs through a target, which is what you want. Now, it was easier to fit one on this because the end of the blade is flat. I had already ground down the edges of the nail head so they didn't stick out as much all around the sides. That was to prevent it from cutting or scratching anybody if they got hit with the sides of it. But it still needed more of a blunting, so I put the rubber tip on. Because I'd already ground down the edges of the nail head, I could get the rubber tip on. Otherwise, it would have been a problem. These rubber tips are designed to go on epee blades, and this is flatter and wider, so you see it just stretched to fit. But because this was flat at the top and more or less parallel at the sides, it fit fine. It was a little more difficult to tip the saber because the tip on this is just rounded and it's slightly tapered. So actually, it wanted to slide off. I just ground the end off flat and then smoothed it and jammed this in there, and it stayed so far. I don't think it's as secure as the one on that, but so far it's been pretty secure. I've thrust it into things, and I've not had a problem with it coming off or whatever. So, they're ugly. I don't like them. Honestly, I don't think you're going to notice they're there except for the aesthetics. But, presumably if you were good enough or experienced enough fencer, you might notice the extra weight on the end of your sword. I don't know. I haven't. It hasn't changed the handling of the sword as far as I'm concerned. Do they look fugly? Yeah. But it's better than somebody accidentally getting poked. So usually this isn't a big deal for long swords because most of them, the blades are, especially for fetters, because the tips are usually rounded or spatulate or rolled tips or something where it's wide enough that it's not going to risk hurting anybody and there's no jagged edges or sharp edges. Something like this or like the rapier is a little different, and you may have to tip them depending on the sword. A lot of more expensive gymnasium sabers, for example, that people may use to do military saber in HEMA do have rolled tips. This one doesn't. This just had a blunt tip. Literally. It was a rounded tip that was blunt. And that wouldn't be very safe in a thrust, So something like this is a help. And just wanted to throw that out there. Remember to tip your swords if you think they may need it. There's no point in anybody getting hurt. Safety is important. They look ugly, but it's better than somebody getting, skewered through the brisket. So, Lone Rider out. Be safe. Stay cool.